And as always, there's probably some people that will be joining a little later, but you're here, and that's the most important thing. So thanks for joining, and thanks for attending the session. If you have questions along the way, just put them into the chat or the Q&A section, then we'll try to cover them. I guess if you put them into the Q&A, it becomes a little easier to remember to check that we have covered all of them. And yeah, I can see you already accepted the chat. I really appreciate that. It's good to see that there's actually some people that are listening and hearing what's going on. So keep it up. Put some comments what you see in here, and I would like to see those things. So today's topic is about testing, and I think for a lot of integration developers, testing is not really something we want to do, but I guess it's also not something we can live without, which is a bit of a challenge. So today I will cover how you can actually make it easy. And I think this is what we all want, an easy way to be testing, to understand what is going on. So we have a lot of things that we want to cover. So why do you test? And yeah, why integration? What's the standard way of testing? How can you automate this? How do you add testing as a part of your development process? And how do you test your PI to CPI or integration suite migrations also, which is also a topic that we cover. And then we'll cover how you can actually get started. And this is not going to be like a mystery. It is, I hope, what I want to convey, that this is something that you can easily get started on. It is not something that will take a lot of difficult work programming to get started working with these things. Why test? My story, I hope I can imagine you have something similar. So I guess it was on my first project as a freelancer, like 14 years ago or something like that, where this really struck me that it was really challenging to do development and testing and have good processes in place. So we're doing a go live, and you probably know this. It's pretty chaotic when you're in a go live scenario. One of the tasks I got was, here's an order interface. There was one thing we forgot, this type of order. Could we please add some kind of a condition to it so we can start working with it? So I worked with the business consultant. We figured out a pretty quick fix to it. We tested it with just this sample message that he had brought, and it looks successful, and we were all happy. So yeah, thanks for joining. Then we moved it into production because our test said it was okay. And I think we had to pull a few favors to get the basis guy to import this into production. And then it worked. We saw some of these orders that had failed previously were processed, and everybody was happy. Until a few hours later, when the business complained that they did not exceed the normal orders that they had expected. And we had to check everything was okay, and we found that, oh crap, there was a part of this that did not work, and we needed to fix. So we made a few fixes, fixed it, moved it into production, and found out, resulted. I cannot recall if, so it was orders and they needed to be processed within a certain deadline. I don't recall if we actually made that deadline or they extended it. But the thing here is, the errors is not something that just relates to the business or to the integration team. It actually relates and affects the business process. And that is why I think it is so important that you have test cases that you can actually create and manage these things a lot easier. And if we had a tool like the FIGAF at that point in time, we would have created these test cases. We could have clicked run, seen that everything was okay, and have had a lot more confidence in our changes. have you seen something similar like this? Just say yes or yeah. It happens from time to time that we see something like this. That yeah, it's just there, and this is the reason why we want to avoid this. So wasn't catastrophic, but just one of those things that just add a lot of extra complexity to it. So when I talk about testing, there's, I guess, a couple of reasons why you want it. So as a developer, you want to be sure that you have covered all the different scenarios, and you have documented what are the scenarios that it works. Everything looks successfully, and that is the important things. Hi, thanks for joining. That you would actually see here. So as a developer, I want to cover that, and I want to document this is how it works. From a business side, obviously, the more you can test, the fewer of these problems that we have previously seen. Or my last example, that would not have happened if we had an automated regression test. We could have easily covered these things. And then the next is the next developer that is going to work on this integration will have really a good starting point, because there's nothing worse than just getting a documentation about this is a order interface. It handles orders and maps it to an order IDOC. And that's all you're getting. You have no clue about how to trigger this, who's involved in this, and all these things. So it just becomes really complicated. If we talk about this, and I guess from my experience back then, obviously a lot of it has not changed since then. The challenge is, if you want to create a normal test case, it can take days to create, because there's a lot of complexity, and I think we'll cover also I guess a topic like Postman in here. So something can be easy. If you want to use end-to-end automation, it just becomes too challenging. And then the next is, if you then spend these 2 days on creating these test cases, you're sure that they are never going to be updated, because it will take another 2 days just to update the test case to cover this need. And then there's not enough complexity in the messages that you have. So whenever I ask the business, okay, please test an order IDOC, they would send an order IDOC with one line item, and it's like, okay, my logic can probably handle that. My logic has a challenge, which if you're sending a production order with 3 different or 15 different line items with 3 different types all mixed in, like you see. And that is why I think it's a good idea to have the ability to take data from your, for instance, your productive system, and reuse those as regression tests. And yeah, and then obviously it's a challenge to run these things. How do we actually embed that into your development process? Hopefully by the end of today you have seen what would be possible. And then why test? We want to, yeah, I guess we covered that. It's about avoiding problems, make it easier to do bug fixes, etc. Okay, so when you are testing, what is the way you're testing your SAP Cloud Integration? We have a poll coming up right now. Are you using Postman or some other tools for it, or do you just skip it, or is it too complex? That, I guess, is an interesting one. Do I see it here? Hopefully it popped up on your screen. Yeah, okay. Only one uses pickup, and I guess that's me. Anyway, cool. I created a similar post a long time ago, and here it was the similar scenario. You're using Postman, and I really think Postman is a good tool to do ad hoc development, but creating test cases in it is a bit of a challenge, and I think we will cover it here. And this is, it's good for development if you have, let's just close the poll. It's good if the response coming back from this is success, or you can check the status message of it, then Postman is really good. You can also set up assertions that say, okay, I would expect that the status of this is okay, or we have resended to whatever. So you can set up these kind of assertions. And then you can take some of these and you can also run it in a pipeline. So based on the different scenarios, be able to run them. And that's all good. But as with the other ones, it does require some effort setting it up, getting it to run, have the Postman collection or the collections that you share in the team. So everybody would actually be able to run these tests whenever they have something that's going on. And it obviously needs to be easy. It needs to be able to check these things. And I think a lot of times I've just seen that you have like a simple Postman collection that just say send message to this interface and then you're good to go. Just say if I'm wrong, you have better processes. The other thing is obviously, yeah. Yeah, I guess, Michael, you have some limitations, and I guess that's also what we have seen with our internal usage. The number of collections is fairly limited. You then need to upgrade to some of the paid plans that will give you some more. So yeah, hopefully you will see the FIGAF tool as an alternative, but we'll cover that. It only covers like testing of HTTP endpoints. So if you have something else, you need to add like an extra HTTP to internal process flow into it to be able to trigger these things. Another question is mocking of these things. I do think that Postman do have some options, but it is really challenging to set up these extra mocking endpoints to handle such scenarios. And yeah, then you come back to the same one. It is time consuming to both create really good test cases, maintain them, run them, update them whenever something changes. You obviously have Groovy XSLT in your code, and there's here you can put them into a Git repository, and I think that anyway is a good process. But obviously you need to make sure that they are script maintained, and you can use some kind of a testing framework to test these things and make sure it is okay. And then I guess the last thing, if you want to test mappings, iFlows, you do have the option to use the simulation, upload a message, process it, and see if it is producing the right result here. I think I did hear about that there was an API on the roadmap that would allow you to trigger this asynchronously, or whatever you would call it, to check or run just one scenario. And yeah, then so you can also save some payloads, and yeah, but yeah, it does some. So normally when you run a simulation, it will just give you a result. Then you need to check, is this result what we're actually looking for? Cool. Okay, so let's talk about how to automate these things. How can we actually embed this into your normal development process so it becomes a lot easier to work with? Hi, Ankur. Good. So I have a number of different scenarios I will be covering here. So the first one is record a test case from an iFlow that has already been running. So we need to create a flow. It needs to be simple. When you have tested with Postman, you would probably have seen that the iFlow is processed successfully, and you can then use this as a way to as a recording. We're also different ways of recording, where you can just say record the next 10 messages or iFlows that has been triggered, keep them in trace mode, do all of these different things. And yeah, we want to configure the recording. So let's try that. So I guess, so here we have the FIGAF tool. Right now it's deployed on our local server. You can also deploy it on BTP Cloud Foundry, and I think that is probably where we recommend that you run the tool in. So the first thing is we have an iFlow, and I guess I have it here on a different screen. Is the background too much? I guess we cannot do anything with that. Okay, so the easiest way I normally find is just to go here, search for get customer to distribution configuration. That's QA. Here we have this guest customer. So we can, from the FIGAF tool, it's easy. We have access to all the different artifacts. We can browse it here. Okay, so now we have an iFlow, it started, and we want to create a test case for this. To do that, we switch the iFlow to trace mode. We integrate tightly with CPI Helper. It's just a simple tool to manage your integrations. And what we then do is I go here and I will trigger a message, obviously using Postman. And now we can see here, 19 minutes past, it has created a new message. We can select record in FIGAF here, and we will create. So now FIGAF knows that there's an iFlow here. It has been processed in trace mode, and we have, using the message ID here, we can then say, okay, ammo for so let's just do it like this. We can select different parameters for this. Are there anything specific we can find that is useful for these scenarios? And we press save, click create. And what it will do is it will now go to this iFlow, fetch all of the different payloads that you have on this this iFlow, and this just makes the process so much easier. If it worked, or did I have something I missed? So last poll was skipped. So it already had that one because I had created it somewhere else. Let me just trigger it again. Yeah, so it was not triggered first time. So add it to this test read. We will override the message expression here. So that was why the timestamp was off. And now we can see it has processed some messages here. We can see what it has fetched, all of these different steps in it. If we press close, we can now see we have one with 35 outbound. So let's just delete the one we created wrongly. And now we have actually created a test case. So we can select it and created a test suite for this one where we want to run this. So down like that. So that is actually all you needed to do to create a test case. And then what we can then do is, let's say we go into our iFlow here. We make a modification. Good value. Change it here. Save as version. And we then deploy it. So right now we have a test case. We can obviously run it, and we should hopefully see that it is correct. If we then get a task to make a modification, we can easily just go in here. In the tool, we can also give figure information that there is an iFlow that has been updated. What I can then do is I can go back here in my test cases. So here I have my test case that I just created. View the results. So I guess we did not run it. So obviously there's a lot of, so let's just take the test case here. So here we have the test case. We can go and we can say, okay, let's run this again. So when we run it, we switch the iFlow into trace mode, fetch all of the different messages that is being processed on this. View result. We can see it has tested with the newest version. We can see if it has been deployed. And in a bit, we can see that it has some new messages, but one error. And if we look at the diffs here, we can see that there was an endpoint here that was different, and we did not expect that. So we knew. So this was the purpose of this, to actually show we could see that something has happened. If you want to ignore certain elements, you can just click and then you can ignore a certain aspect, so dates, times, where it makes sense, or that would always change between these ones. So what I can then do is I can go and I can update my test case, drop all the messages. That means that next time I run it, I would actually be able to check that this is correctly. So if I go back here on the test case information, we can see when this was created, recording created, and which version it was created with. So there's a lot of information that you can use for the governance, understanding what is being changed for these scenarios. Good. The next part I guess we need to cover is mocking. And you probably have a lot of these scenarios where you are sending data to SuccessFactors, create employee, and you need to understand, okay, but I'm changing my Groovy script after this, and I have no clue about how to call this. And if I needed to create employee, I need to generate random data, send it to the service, and then expect the data. Yes, you can create all of these operations. They can be done without CPI helper. But we just want to make it easy, because CPI helper just simplifies the process and give you all the context that you need. But you can set up all of these operations without CPI helper. Obviously, that is where we started. But it's just an improvement. So the way we've done this is we are actually automatically creating new iFlows that will call, and where you can actually see what is going on. So it will create a new iFlow, change all the external endpoints to the FIGAF tool. So instead of calling the SOAP service or OData service or FTP, it will call a FIGAF endpoint, and then it will get that message that it is supposed to be getting at that specific point in time. And then we can compare the request and understand what's going on. So let's take our test case here. We have it on object here. So there's different ways you can configure this, but we just do it globally. We can say here, do not use endpoint, and then when I run it, testing result here, we can run it. You will then see it is actually triggered at different endpoint or different endpoints. So it would automatically create these iFlows. And as you can then see here, it is using an HTTP endpoint that is connecting with the FIGAF server. And if you look at the real one, you can see here, this is an OData endpoint connecting with an OData service. So this means that it just becomes so much easier to be able to test these scenarios. That means I can test all the logic behind here based on the same input. There's obviously something that we cannot check or we cannot modify with this setup, but in most cases, this does not really propose a challenge for the test case. So if we look at here, it has been deployed, and we can see it has this F logo, which means this trace message. If I pull here, I can see everything has been processed successfully. And if I look here in the trace, I can see that the payload coming out here is coming from FIGAF, and I think there is something you can see that some parameters that is being set or different in the headers, cache control or whatever. I think here we can actually see when it was really created. Cool. So that's the mocking part. So it's just a check mark. You can create that for some test cases. You can, or not for all scenarios. There was a question, or
I moved them into questions.
Okay. So you're talking about service virtualization, whether or not this is that concept. It is more a mocking of that specific API. So we do not have a way to specify and say, okay, you sent us purchase order 5, and then you will also return purchase order 5 with that specific endpoint. I guess that would not be too big a challenge to in the mocked messages go in and say, okay, fetch an XPath element from an incoming payload and use that as a way to test this. Yeah, maybe it will be. But our challenge is more what we're focusing on is more on the testing the iFlow and that it works correctly. I hope that was what you're looking for. But I guess, yeah, the other thing should probably also be an option to understand what can be delivered here. One of the concepts we do have is we are adding a container variable that is being set and then moved in here. Good. So now we have checked that we can mock an endpoint. We can see everything is successful. And now just removed it because we don't want to test it anymore. We can remove these iFlows that's been created. But yeah, Myers, let's have a chat afterwards. Maybe that would actually be something we could also extend it to. So the way the mocking works is, so let me just show you where we're getting this. So we have here the test case. Here we have the result that is coming back, or the messages that is being used here. We can then see the step. If we see here, we have the OData flow. We have the response coming here. So if we look at the headers here, we can see this is the incoming message. And then if we look at the response coming here, we can view that this is the outgoing message that is being sent back from this. And yeah, we can then modify this if we want to send a specific payload for this correlation ID. And here we can see the correlation ID, I guess, when we created it. So that was mocking. I hope, Faisal, that covered what you wanted. Also, otherwise, just write more. Good. So that was mocking. We switched it off. The other one, and I guess this is also a little on the Postman side, if I find the right slide, is this unit test. So for this scenario, what we can do is we can create a unit test that allows us to trigger any Groovy script with some limitations what we can actually do. And this allows, one of the key features of this is it allows you to manage your integration, or you want to improve the way you're delivering integrations. So what we are doing here is we have here on the test case here, we have here that says generate Groovy script and add it to a Git repository. I already did that, but just give you an idea of what this contains. Then it contains a common folder you can add to a Git repository with some code in for managing these standard templates. And then it also contains content for that specific iFlow. So these are the same data that is then being split into the iFlow. And let me just show you what the Git repository look like. So I believe that IntelliJ makes it a lot easier for you to develop your integrations. I hope you can see it here. So what we have here is we have an iFlow where the tool continuously updates the Groovy with this, or the Git repository with these information, and this just makes it a lot easier for you to manage this. So I can set a breakpoint here, and then I have the test case that is being created for these scenarios. And what I can do is I can then run this in debug. I can't recall which one I had, so just run the all in debug, and we can then see it stops at a point here in the code, and we can see, okay, so what's wrong here? We can look at the different artifacts, and this just makes the development a lot easier to see what you have at a specific point in time. We can then continue this, and it comes also. Do not stop there. Rerun failed tests. Towards the end of this, if it worked or if we ran all of these tests successfully, we would then get the test results that we can see if everything was run successfully. And this just makes it easy. Just run it here normally without debug. Here we can see it has 7 passed tests, and if we drill down, normally we can see this. We can see the different input and output payloads that it has created. All of this without us lifting a finger to handle these scenarios. And if there was any difference, we would then see some error and notification on what was wrong. And yeah, we've made it so I can figure out how to do this, and I'm not really a good Groovy developer, and I don't know how to set up all of these different things. But it is fairly simple. There's obviously some challenges getting it up and running because there's a number of libraries you need to get to work. But the idea is you got everything. Okay, Ty. So this is IntelliJ. I'm just using this because I enjoyed IntelliJ as a way of working with Groovy code. In here, we have a Git repository. This is automatically populated by the figaf tool. And so that means that all your scripts, all your iFlows, all your unit tests are delivered to this Git repository, and that means you as a developer can run these unit tests without knowing a lot about setting up these things. So there's a few things you need to do to get this, like adding the SAP libraries. Everything else is just imported, making it easy for you to run these things. The reason we chose IntelliJ is our development team is using that, and it has some good features for handling this, and you don't need to use everything else. You could also use IntelliJ to deal with these scenarios. Is that what you're looking for, Ty? Or anyone else got lost here? What I just wanted to give you is that it is possible to create unit tests or scripts without spending a lot of time on setting up all of these different things, because we have all of the content we needed for this. Okay. Number 3 here is so obviously Postman is the way you want to start out with the development and getting started with in development process. But you can actually also use the FIGAF tool for that. And let me show you. So the idea here is that I start my development on this specific iFlow, and then I want to find or want to create a new test case that I can use. Where this is. Yes, so when FIGAF is installed, no matter where you have the FIGAF system installed, it would replicate to a Git repository, and then you will pull this Git repository, and then you would be working on that one. We don't want you to work, so you can work locally on a Git repository. We don't recommend that because it just gives you a lot of extra complexity. So all data needs to be replicated to a Git repository. Then you pull this for the usage, and this way you can do this local ID development and debugging. Cool. Good. So I'll create a test case here. It will show you where you can otherwise run this. For now, we don't need that. We will create and add it to our existing test suite. We would give it a name that is input. And here we can specify what we want. We can then create 2 payloads, one inbound, one outbound, and they need to be related. I think we found that you needed to specify this, but the idea is you just specify an input payload. You can then find CPI input you want to use, and then you want to specify what are the outputs. So here we're looking at the end event, and then I can create this as a test case. We can also use this using a file for some scenarios. And so now I have a test case here that's called input. If I go to my test case here, I can run it. And the benefit of this is you can then see the data and use that when you're testing. So no need to, so this is 37 matches. That we can see this is the body that we uploaded for this specific scenario. And then it will perform the test, and you can then continuously update this test if it worked or if there were some differences. So here we are sending some data. We did not match it correctly. But the idea here, well, either we can go in and update this one so it matched the precise element that we receive here. My main idea was I just wanted to use the FIGAF tool to be testing these things. And what I can then do is I can go here, I can then say update and create as test result, drop all messages. And then next time I run it, now I have a test case that matches this scenario that I wanted to cover, and we can easily manage this also. So no more need to create these things in Postman. You can actually trigger it with FIGAF, and then you can send messages, see the result, and perform all the necessary steps as a part of this. Make sense? Good. I need to speed up a little. Maybe good. You can also go in and modify special conditions. So if we have created a test case, we can go in and we can change any payload at any point in time. So maybe the flow would be different, and then we can update the flow so it matches that specific flow of messages that is being used here. This just makes it easier for you to copy these things. You can create and copy test cases that you have run and then be able to actually process them easily. Cool. Where are we? Where did it go? There, big one. Cool. Yes. So that was what we want to cover there. We also do have a PI to CPI migration tool. This is a part of the free offering that we are giving users access to for 1 year. If you're doing migration, this is highly recommended to be able to use this on your migration projects. And let me just show you how easy it is. So you can, there's different abilities that you can give, or different roles that you can give to users regarding running tests or validating these tests. You can also give them just the report and say, okay, or schedule some of these test cases or test suites to run every night, and then you can send the result of them, or you can run a test suite and send Excel of this processing. So there's a lot of different ways to give this data, but I think you can also, there's also a user you can use that can only run tests and see the details, because I guess, yeah, you need to see what the difference is to be able to ignore these things or figure out what to do with those scenarios. Cool. So let's do a short PI to CPI testing. I'll go back here. So to do that, we'll go to our PI to CPI migration. Here we have an iFlow, and I created. Here you can see all the iFlow. If you click here, you'll generate a report of the results, and you can see what's going on. I wanted to find the one I had just created. So here we have an iFlow that's created, migrated today. I can migrate, or I can record test cases from my PI system. So I'll just add it to the same test case. I can specify some specific messages that I want to process. Let me just send some messages in. So right now I've just sent 2 messages in. They should be here. So there's a lot of different ways. This is sending messages in. The different ways is just wait for some messages or look at what has been processed and create test cases from this. So right now we'll create a test case for these messages, and we can see we got 1 inbound and 6 outbound messages. We will create this as a test case. That's okay. What we can then do now is we will go back to our overview, and here we can see we right now have 1 test case that has been migrated. We will select a new one, and this will be the one we just created here. We will select migrate, and then, yeah, obviously this is a little fast. It knows where to fit the payloads in this because we have migrated with the FIGAF tool. If you've used SAP's tool to migrate, it will also allow you to select where in the BPMN you should pick up these messages. And now you can then create the test case. I have this new iFlow here. I can go and I can run it, where it will then process this and understand how to handle the scenario. And if we look at the results here, we can see it processed pretty quickly, because here we only expect using the couple of messages that we want. So we can look at the diffs here. There's a date. We can easily just go and ignore that. Perform a full comparison again, or partly synchronization. And then we can see everything is now green. So everybody was happy. Everything worked out successfully. So this is really a simple way to test that the migration works and everything is easy to use. Yeah. So we, together with SAP, we wanted to create a service that allowed you to use the tool to manage your migration and to test it. It will only allow you to take a PI message and run it on integration suite, or cloud integration, integration suite, for a period of time. It's free up to 1 year. There's also a migration assessment. It's really a cool tool also to give you an understanding of how things is being processed. We do, if you take the migration edition, we do have 2 upgrades. One is the DevOps, which includes this creating of iFlows test cases directly. DevOps, we have a lot of other sessions in that topic. And then you can also cover the migration, which takes an iCore receiver determination and converts that into an iFlow, just as the one, I guess I didn't show it, with retries, local processes, everything just auto-generated. Okay, so the one thing I want is, testing is a necessity. It's something that should be a part of your life. It sounds pretty boring, but it is an important aspect of it. So each time you need to test, make a change, test it, and then you need to update the test case. So the next developer would say, okay, everything is running successfully. Everybody is happy. Because otherwise you end up with, well, this test doesn't work. Is that because the system is wrong or something else has happened? And then obviously you need to to be able to test and document that all changes have been tested. And here the DevOps transport tool really simplifies that process also. So the business case, so obviously you want to convince management that this is something that is interesting for you guys, and a good way to. So it's something about what are the different delivery, or how do you deliver it? What's the KPIs that you're actually working on? And I do think a lot of integration teams do not have really some good APIs or KPIs for these things. It's all about, well, we feel it's going okay, but we don't really have a clue about what's going on. But obviously, everybody wants to be able to deliver integration faster, being able to resolve issues faster, and then have fewer errors on the first deployment of an integration. And this is what is essential with the testing part of it. I guess for you as a developer, this also makes sense because, I don't really think a lot of developers want to be spending time on creating test cases. It should be as easy, so something that you actually do. You want to deliver better quality, and you want to have better confidence in your releases. So I was talking with a developer, and he had been pushing off creating test cases for a long period of time for a development that he did. We spent 15 minutes on creating first a baseline test case, then applied his new fix, tested it again, proved the difference, what it was, updated the test case, and now next time he's going to update this iFlow, he has a test case. So we talked about the API from SAP's simulation. I don't know when that is going to happen. I know that there's obviously a lot of the online APIs that you would be able to use, but it is a bit challenging. Or were there other APIs that you were looking for? Yes. And then, the business case is often really hard for testing, because, as we saw with the first one, you don't have these scenarios often. How long time does it take to recover from a bad message? It is obviously something that covers a lot more than just the integration team. What does it fix to cost? It's more that the error correction, labor cost, both integration team, business team, and you have something about loss of reputation that, is not really good. And what does it cost for the production to be offline for 1 hour? Then that is really a simple case to say, okay, this is not acceptable. We want to improve this. And obviously, it's really hard to estimate. This is worth 100,000, 500,000 euros. Yeah, you don't really know in advance. So yeah, if you want, you can invite your boss. I'm considering whether or not it would make sense to do a training where we cover these cover testing in more details and just go, so this is how you set up the tool to create test case. Here's how you create these different test cases, run them, manage them. Is that something you'd be interested in? Drop a note here in the chat or drop me an email, and we'll find something on creating a course or a training. And I guess it is a couple of hours or 1-2 hours that it should take to get the tool running and be able to create this. So we do not support ABAP proxies. And when dealing with this, obviously you can still test them, but the handling of the ABAP proxies is still something that is outside of the tool. But if that proxy has not been changed, you can obviously use the tool to take a message from the PI system, process it on the CPI system or integration suite system, and be able to see that it actually performs the testing correctly. So I recommend that you do take action of this. This is really important. So a little about the different editions we do have. So the migration edition, obviously a must if you're doing migrations. The migration tool, this allows you to take the ICOs receiver determinations and migrate them. We didn't cover this. And then you have the DevOps suite. This is the topic we talked about today, wherein the testing is a part of it. Did I actually remove the testing here? We get the regression testing here. So the testing is obviously important here, and this is all the things that we covered today. But there's a lot more scope about handling these things. Is the full suite where we have thought about everything you need to do to manage the integrations. I do recommend that you go to figaf.com/devops, sign up for trial. You can run it on laptop. You can run it in BTP Cloud Foundry. So we have had customers that have deployed in BTP Cloud Foundry, tried it out, upgraded to a paid license, and then started using it there. And I think that is definitely the best way to work with this. We also do have a cloud trial, and this would allow you to take to use our infrastructure to create some of these scenarios and test it. It is only for evaluation. We do not recommend it for productive use cases because the BTP is also important. We currently do not support MuleSoft for testing, but if there's a customer requirement for that, I guess it should not be difficult to add support for MuleSoft. But we'll need to evaluate how this would work out and what we can actually do, and where we can add values in it. So it is definitely something we hear about from time to time. So we do have. So when you sign up here at the site, you will see links to how to deploy it. And then you can also deploy it to the BTP Cloud Foundry trial. I'm not sure if it's still there or if you still can use the trial account. But we do the app can be deployed there, and that's probably the best way to get started with it. So there you deploy the FGAF. It is 5 Cloud Foundry commands that you need to use to deploy it. And then you can explore it. And obviously that is the best way to do this, because there you see most things. And then the laptop is the easiest way, because it just needs a Java 8 to run. that was all I wanted to do. I made it almost in time. If you have questions, put them into the Q&A. I can see that there are some. Let me try those. So Michael asked, is it difficult to set up the tool? No. So by far the easiest is to deploy it in B2B Cloud Foundry. When you are connecting, that's a lot of things here. More questions, just put them into the chat. So it is pretty easy to connect to it and install it in B2B Cloud Foundry. It is 5 commands that you need to run to do that. And then once you have done that, you will go here to the Agents tab, and here you will then create a CPI agent. Here you will be guided through the different steps that you need to deal with to set this up. This includes API, giving it API access, giving it run a message processing access, and then we're also adding a custom IDP, identity provider, that would allow you to handle these scenarios. Normally customers can do this themselves. It is not that difficult. We can also help you set it up. It is pretty simple anyway. If that is something you need, book a session with me and I can help you set that up. And then once you have added this, you can start testing. The part that becomes a little more challenging is if you deploy it locally, then you need to have the cloud connector to give you access from CPI to it here. So B2B scenarios, we do support testing of these scenarios. Are you talking migration or testing? So we do support all the EDI formats when testing. So we can compare EDI messages, and we started out doing that in PI also, obviously. But for the main part, it is about making this setup. We tried migrating some EDI mappings from B2B to cloud integration, and that seems to be working. It is definitely one of the topics we will be discovering more, and if you have that as a challenge now, let's connect, because we need to be able to support EDI migrations, and our vision is that you'd be using the tool to migrate, and then you'd actually be able to see what is going on. There's a few things that probably need to be improved in that area, but it is definitely possible. So there was another one. Andrew. Okay, any other questions? So B2B migration, yes, we do support that. Right now it's manual, but there is still some things that you need to work with. So any other questions? And we do still have a couple of minutes left, and I will be hanging out here if you have more questions. But thanks for joining. I do hope you will take action and you will set up a trial, getting started, and see how this works. And if you have any other questions or challenges, just reply. You should have my email, so it should be pretty easy to be able to cover those things. But for now, just thanks for attending. Thanks for all the good questions. I really appreciate it. Yes, that was what I wanted to say.